This is the OverReaction podcast.
Peter,
What's up,
welcome.
Jeremy? Thanks so much. I'm super excited to be here. My very first podcast ever.
Ooh. Yeah, it should be fun, man. This will be really good. It's been a bit. So how you been?
Been pretty good. Been pretty busy. I've got a whole new life now. I'm back on the provider side and chasing my dream of being a value adding CEO to a large provider system someday. So it's been fun up until
Fingers
this
crossed.
point. Yeah, right. So the work is definitely, it's fast moving. There's a lot going on, and I'm really just enjoying it. So it's been good. Yeah.
So you're Duly Health.
Yes, Duly Health and Care. So my role is I'm the VP over our EMR systems, and our EMR system is Epic. And so Duly's like 6,500 employees, around 180 locations. It's
Wow.
it's based around the Chicagoland area. We also have clinics in South Bend and in Quincy, Illinois. So
How many people still call you guys DuPage?
I think it happens all the time. Some of our phone systems are like, DuPage Medical Group is now Duly Health and Care and stuff like that. So it's been a good transition. I think people are picking up on the name and stuff. So it's been good. But what hasn't changed is like our differentiator is our doctors and our nurses and our front desk folks. And so that's like just,
I've never heard that before. I'm sorry.
I know, right? But it's true. Like, and so I've
Well,
like,
yeah, give me more then.
yeah.
I'm
So
gonna be the skeptic, and
yeah,
you're gonna
I
drink the
will.
Kool-Aid. But dude, you've always been a straight shooter. So yeah,
Yeah. So I
tell me
drink
why
my own Kool-Aid,
tell me
right?
why it's different this time.
Yeah. So like, where I live, I've had care throughout the years, right? Like my primary care providers at University of Chicago, right? That's where I worked like the first 12 years
Yeah,
of my
they see you as an ATM. I know.
exactly.
Look at this guy.
And then,
This cash.
as you get older, some of us graduate to a cardiologist, and like my cardiologist is at Northwestern, right? And so, when I signed up to join Duly, I was like, all right, I'm going to try our health system, right? I'm going to give this a shot. So, I brought my kids in for like their sports physicals, right? Like we're not quite ready to switch primary care doctors because you've established those relationships, right? But like sports physicals, my glasses stopped working, and I was like, all right, I need to go have my eyes just fully checked out. I went to ophthalmology and stuff, right? So I've been like dipping my toe into the Duly Care pond, and I've got to say, like the people that I've met and interacted with at every step of the way, like they're all happy to be there. They all love their job, and the doctors have just been welcoming with open arms. And I don't know that you find that everywhere. You know what I mean? So it's just been exceptional. And of course, I haven't walked in and going, yeah, I'm in charge of the EMR. Like I'm not announcing who I am. I'm secret shopping, And
Yeah, of course.
similarly, my wife had to go have some blood tests, and I was like, oh, well, go over to Duly, go check it out. And she came back, gushing about how the person who helped her, because she's real nervous about like, the injection and all that's, putting the needle in and all that. And I guess she's a hard stick. So she's always ready to like get 2 or 3 pokes. And the person was just like, poked her on the first shot, was super kind. Everything just went smooth. And she came home like, that was
I need that
good.
phlebotomist.
Right? Oh, they're hard.
Because I have a commercial driver's license.
Okay.
Dude, I've had the craziest, stupidest career. But
gonna
so
say,
I,
we
I
could touch on that because I'm wondering, what are you driving around? You know.
so my family, so my grandpa and my great uncle, they're Jewish immigrants. Their family had escaped Russia and getting wiped out by the Bolsheviks, and then getting wiped out by the Germans. So they came over anyway.
Wow.
And so they went to Baltimore and then migrated up to southern Alberta, where I grew up in Canada. And at the time, Jews didn't have like a ton of options. So they were doing like manual labor. And my grandpa didn't, I don't think my uncle did. They didn't graduate from high school. So they started hauling like ice from northern Alberta, which you don't have to go too far north in Canada to get ice, for ice
I was
boxes,
gonna say,
right? So
was
you
he
have
like an
fridges.
ice road trucker? Because that was like one of my
Well,
favorite
before,
shows.
yeah, but it's more like they'd drive ice road truck and they cut the ice and then haul it off, right? Because they had the old ice boxes. They didn't have fridges, that ice boxes. And so then they started their own little business, and they'd haul coal and whatever. And then they started a trucking company. And then when the oil, because there's a ton of oil in Alberta, so they started an oil field trucking company where they would drive trucks and they would dismantle the drilling rigs, those huge drilling rigs, and then they would go move them to a new lease where the oil company, the exploration company, would drill, and then they would reassemble. They would reassemble the whole oil
Interesting.
rig. And so then my dad took it over, and then I started working at my dad's company. You know, working with the welders, spraying down, cleaning trailers and trucks, replacing, huge wheel sets and these big brake assemblies. And then worked in the pipe yard, with these huge 10-ton forklifts moving pipe. And then I started driving truck. And so I drove big rig out in the oil patch, and the trucks there are very different, way bigger than the highway haulers.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and then came down. Why was I even talking about this?
No idea, but I'm
How
fascinated.
to get on this tangent?
Keep going. Tell me more.
Oh, no, it was the phlebotomist. Sorry.
That's right.
So
we'll
then,
get back to healthcare in a minute, folks.
So I have to do, and so I decided to keep it because I'm like, hey, if the world ever goes truly to hell, they don't need software presidents, guys that run software companies.
Yeah.
Like they're still going to need welders, electricians, probably truck drivers. So I've just kept it active. So I put myself through school driving truck because it paid better than working, I don't know.
Yeah, for sure.
Retail or McDonald's or something.
Yeah.
And so then I drove, work construction, just drove truck, and I just wanted to keep it. So I have to go every 2 years. And now we're the Department of Homeland Security. I have to go through like clearance with that. I don't even touch. I have a truck driver's license, but I have to get a physical every 2 years. So they're always drawing blood, and sometimes they suck so bad. And so usually, because I'm right-handed, they take it to the left, but they've caused all my veins to collapse on the left side.
Gosh, wow!
Because they're so bad. Like one time, this lady 4 different times, and I'm like, just you could see the bruising like spreading everywhere. I'm like, I'm not kind of squeamish, but I'm starting to get a little squeamish because you're just jabbing the heck out of me. So I need that. So whoever your wife went to,
come on down. I think
make a
it might be
Chicago.
a little bit of a drive from Utah, but yeah, I was going to say I'm in Chicago, but let's fly in. I could introduce you. It could be like a whole like spa experience. Maybe we'll find a new revenue stream. Like I don't know.
Speaking of that, did you participate in my little poll about concierge medicine? I think you did.
Yeah, I think so. Well, no. There's a poll on
private equity.
No, I don't think I saw that. You were asking me about like some cloud stuff, right? So I don't think I saw
that. Yeah, that was just some different research. But this, so I did this poll on concierge medicine. I'm actually kind of surprised by. Actually, let me share my screen. I'll show it to you.
Yeah, let's take a look.
Actually, do I even know how to do this? I've never done it on a podcast before. Let's see. Where is it? Oh, there we go. All right.
I thought you were going to share one of your snarky posts because those are my favorite.
Oh, I might. Can you see my screen?
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah. So it was just that article. I can't even remember what it was. There's some super high end, some really high end concierge where someone's paying like 50 grand a year. And I put out an article about it. Just, I put a bunch of stuff on LinkedIn all the time, stirring up trouble, and kind of got some heated comments about, and I don't even know why. Like, I wasn't taking a side on. I was just posting it, and
well, it is LinkedIn.
People are like, oh, it's worth it or it's not. And I'm like, and then someone's like, you should run one of your polls. I'm like, okay, fine. So you can see here, and I didn't go up to 50 grand. I'm like, that to me, that's bananas. But I was kind of surprised. Like, it's the math doesn't add up, because I think my team rounded up 1%, so it's just 101% there, I think. But
that's reaction being extra.
Yeah, there you go. We call it reaction plus. We'll give you an extra 1%.
We add value to you even in our polls.
We're like politics. Our thumb is always on the scale. That's our new motto. Our thumb is always on the scale.
Whatever results you want,
like,
we can deliver.
It's like 50% of people are willing to pay, and then I'm like, okay, well, let's break it out. It's not surprising, right? You've got like, on the people willing to spend like 5 to 10 grand. C-level's way up there in VP. You get 10, 20, C-level VP way up there. People that are manager level in their career, they're not. Yeah. And then people are really going to spend like to go all out. They're no managers, right? It's just all like kind of executive level stuff. So
right.
Just to your point about kind of like, oh, we should start a service. I was kind of surprised by that. I didn't think that number of people would actually go for that. Yeah, and one of my concerns is kind of the way, I'd like to get your opinion on the way healthcare is going, is that I can almost foresee a day where everyone's on like Medicare Advantage or something like that. And then, but if you can really afford it, you get this really high end, you can pay for awesome care. Because where I come from, Canada, it was rationed. Like, there's sometimes, Pete, where, you want to go see a doc, and it wasn't just weeks, it was like months.
Yeah. Well, and so it's interesting that you say that. So, my family, I'm first generation born here. My family's from Greece. So my mother and my father actually met here.
Opa.
Right. Exactly.
Dude, I bet every time you hear someone say it, you're like, just shut up.
Right. That's all right. But
how do you say gringo in Greek? That'd be good. Like, anyone who's not Greek.
Like an American? I mean,
yeah, just like foreigner.
Well, you would say xenos, right? Which is like an outsider or whatever. And that's pretty popular from my big fat Greek wedding, right? Like, when the girl was going to marry the American guy, they kept calling him the xenos because he was a non-Greek. Let
me ask a question. Is Windex really a thing? Because my grandpa, Jewish, and he was obsessed with sea breeze. And so I was like,
no, I mean, not in my family, but no, okay. That was never.
So it's just a nice, funny.
I think they just kind of made that up, but
yeah.
But it was a hilarious movie. I love it. I think it's hilarious mainly because there are some Greek families who are like that, and then there are others who are competitive. You know what I mean? So it's just you get all kinds. But I think that movie just kind of showed a great story of togetherness, and a lot of the. I grew up around.
It was really cool
too. We had except my Greek family bought a pizza place in Chicago, right? So, and I grew up in a pizza place, right? And did all that sort of stuff and drove pizzas.
That's awesome.
And, before the internet, I could know the route I would have to take to be most efficient to deliver 8 orders around Skokie and Morton Grove and all these suburbs of Chicago. I would just see all of them and put it in my head and do it. You just kind of, that sort of stuff kind of sticks with you, and so anyways, my point about mentioning Greece is so anywhere that there's, well, I shouldn't say anywhere, but I suspect, right? In Greece, you kind of have a concierge care because you don't really have a choice, if you're sick there and you're in the hospital, you've pretty much got to, I don't know if it's tipping or paying or whatever, but in order to get prioritized care, right? You have to pretty much offer cash to your nurses and your doctors to get prioritized care. That's a real thing that happens, right? So in a way, they have concierge care, right? Because in order to get, you get sort of regular care, based on the, the type of health system it is, right? In Greece, it's not like the US healthcare system, right? It's similar to Canada, single payer kind of model. You kind of get that baseline care. You have to wait, you have to do this, right? But, if you cough up some concierge money, you kind of can get
what you need,
right? And similarly, when I worked at IBM, I had some colleagues who worked in Canada, and it was a similar story that you just shared, right? It's like, oh, well, if you need an MRI, it could take 6 months. And it's like, well, I kind of need it to, like, now, it could potentially cost my life, right? And there's many stories that I heard from my colleague who was like, yeah, we would just come down, from Canada into the US and just pay cash, right?
That's what we did.
CD and go home, right? And it's like, so, I'm not going to take a political position on socialized medicine per se, but I have.
I don't like it. I'll take a political thing.
I have experienced it firsthand, and at least within my family. And I think and as much as there's improvement in the U.S. to be made, I also think the socialized model, also could see some improvements, right? And I think formalizing this whole concierge option, I think makes a lot of sense, right? I'm looking at in the US healthcare system today, when I was in the insurance industry, we were trying to figure out care gaps and communicate those back to our those who we were paying, right? The hospitals, health systems, and stuff like that, because we ultimately want to get patients to a healthier spot, so they don't spend as much on their insurance on the more expensive things, right? If we could prevent your diabetes, that will, etc. So so similarly, on the provider side, it's we're also trying to do things like identify care gaps just to make patients healthier, right? But it's me as a patient, if you could say, hey, Pete, there's an option on your insurance where you could pay a little bit more, maybe not 20 grand more, but you literally have I like to use the word handler lately. So it's if you have your handler, your health handler, somebody who literally is paying attention to your case, and maybe they check on your records that are coming in from various health systems, right? Because it's all going on your phone now, on my Apple phone, right? It's sign up for my chart, this chart, whatever, it all kind of flows into my phone. Somebody who can access something like that and be like, hey, Pete, you just turned 45, which I haven't, but that was a couple of years ago. But, hey, it's time for your colonoscopy, right? It's time for this, it's time for that. And I think as patients, we are getting bombarded by these systems oh, your insurer said you haven't had your colonoscopy or this, but it just becomes this noise. Why? Because it's spam coming to your cell phone or to your house phone, right? You didn't ask for this communication, so you're gonna probably ignore it. Every time I log into, I won't pick what health system, but any one of those my charts, it's oh, well, you haven't had your COVID vaccination, or you haven't had this, and it's yeah, actually I have, it's just over there, I went somewhere else for that, right? But it's if you had a person or a company who literally their job was to look out for you for a nominal fee on an annual basis, I think that would sell. You know what I mean? I think so.
Yeah, a service we should start. I thought about, you got international waters, right? You probably said that one Simpsons where they decided to take the party boat out in the international waters so they can be monkey knife fighting, so this guy can marry a cow, whatever you can do. And then Homer's baiting the Coast Guard, and they're like, come closer, come a little closer. We can't hear you, because they want the sucker Homer to coming back.
Nice.
I was just thinking, it'd be good to have some of these abandoned oil derricks that are out in international waters, those huge giant platforms, and just setting up one of these medical tourist hospitals or whatever, so it's not that far, right? You're not having to go to Bumrungrad Hospital all the way in Thailand or something like that, or go all the way to Colombia to get the most advanced stem cell regeneration, where you don't need all these surgical procedures. They can regrow cartilage, etc. That's a practice.
Into that. I've got a bum shoulder myself, so
I do. I've got 2 bum shoulders from this.
Wow.
I try to weight lift and I can't do
Yeah,
like,
I can't bench. It looks like this. It looks like because
Yeah,
my shoulder, I have no power.
yeah,
My
it's
sport
all jacked
actually,
up, and
I did I did judo and jujitsu like in my 20s, and
awesome.
I'm pretty well. I was a lot bigger then, and I was over 300 pounds. And there's another guy in the gym. I don't know how that happened, but he was bigger than me and stronger than me. And
Snap.
we were sparring, and he got me like in the equivalent of like a full Nelson. And I never really had good um like I never could do squats because my arms still they don't go that far back. They never kind of
Oh,
did. I don't have that like
so
flexibility.
he super wrenched you then. Well,
He ripped my arms back and lifted me up, and I just like, I don't know if I screamed or what, but it stuff tore for sure. And when you're in your 20s, you're a dumbass, so you're just kind of like, oh, it'll be fine, it'll
yeah,
heal. And
yep.
I ignored it because you're Superman when you're in your 20s and nothing can harm you. So yeah, it was like sore for like a few weeks, and my left shoulder healed just fine. And then my right shoulder, not so much. And then like fast forward 20 years, right, of like not having great strength in my shoulder, I went and got an MR. And yeah, so the it's barely connected by a thread in the top of my, he's like, I don't even know. He's like, you're going to need a shoulder replacement in 10 years if you don't get this fixed. So I'm due for some work. My tendon is like, yeah, hanging, the top one like goes right over the top. Um, he's like, I don't even know if I could stretch it. We might have to use like a cadaver thing. And I'm
Oh,
like,
good.
that makes it worse. You shouldn't have told me that part. Like, I don't want,
Get it from like Young Frankenstein. Get it from the
right. I don't want to be like
Abby
piecemeal
normal.
together. So but anyways, I digress. What were we talking about? I've lost track now. We're all over.
Oh, I got us onto an oil derrick, putting up a medical.
Yeah, it's all good. It's all good. I think, yeah, we were talking about concierge care, right? So I think
Well,
that's
part
going
of it
up now with
is people don't. I was talking to this. Well, you and I've been talking to that second opinion medical practice. I mean, think about why they exist is patients don't patients don't feel like they have any control. They actually don't feel like they're the customer in almost any way, shape, or form in healthcare. They feel like
yeah,
they're just some sort of cog. They're in some sort of big machine, and they don't get to decide when it happens, how almost anything happens. And
yeah,
now they look at some new report that shows that now their data is being de-identified and sold off to AI companies and med device companies, and like, hang on a second. I've said this in previous conversations, like, okay, you want to use my data to give me free premiums or something, give me discounted care, like
or
if
pay
you're
me.
now making money off my data,
Yeah. Well,
like,
that's when an idea around the whole, when Apple started capturing all my data on the phone, right? Like, it's sort of like, remember back in the, I'm going to date myself now, but remember like free internet services like Net Zero, right?
yeah,
Like where it had the little advertisement at the bottom and you could cruise the internet for free through your telephone and just have to look at these advertisements, right? And it's sort of like
yep.
you get basically paid for consuming. And so
Well, how about,
why
I don't
not
mean to
pay
get
us?
off on
Why
a
not
time.
pay us for our data? Like,
Yeah,
give me the money, right? And
well, what's
wherever it's
happening now?
used,
Like, I'm watching Netflix and I'm watching Amazon Prime Video, and all of a sudden there's ads coming up. I'm like, hang on a second.
yeah. Didn't I pay
I'm
you?
paying for I'm paying for Prime, and now I gotta pay for all these ads that are popping up. Like, what the
Yeah,
heck is happening here,
I'm
man?
paying
And so
for
you're
my
a patient.
internet.
You're like, hang on a second. My premiums are expensive. My copay is deductibles enormous, and now you're taking all my data, and now you're making other money. You're like, what am I? Just that's what I was joking before. Like, see you walking in, like it's a walking ATM machine, or I guess now it's walking Bitcoin or crypto or something.
Right. But yeah, I don't support, this the sale of data. I mean, I see it as like it's my data. And if I want to sell it, great, right? I should be able to at least get a cut of it and opt in or something, right? I mean, you know, in the movies and stuff, like, you know, the writers are writing the scripts, right? And they are getting residuals over the years and stuff. Why
Yep.
shouldn't I get residuals on my healthcare data? You know what I mean? I'd be happy to sell it if you want it, you know. But to not have the option just because it's de-identified doesn't mean I didn't generate that content, right? Like that content still has my signature on it.
Yeah, I had to do, I went through a lot of pain to get you that data.
Yeah, right.
A lot of pain.
I literally had to be born and grow this whatever's wrong with me for you to learn something from me, right?
Exactly. At least the hackers, you know, the guys that hack and steal your data, at least they're upfront about it. You
right.
know, but it feels like now you got like some guy, some chief data officer at some health systems backed up at the, you know, the loading bay at the back of the hospital. And it's like, hey, yeah, there's a bunch of patient data just fell. What'd you get? Google's like, hey, so where'd you get the data from? Well, I fell off the back of this truck.
Right.
You know?
It's like in Goodfellas with the cigarette truck, like when they rob the person.
We should do it. We should do a meme with that, right? With patient data.
Yes.
You know.
That would be hilarious. But you know, I think there's lots of ways this concierge stuff is manifesting, right? Like look at like the GLP-1 drug craze right now, right? Like
wow.
You've got
Yeah.
Weight Watchers jumping on board, like all of a sudden they're a concierge weight loss place with GLP-1 drugs, right? Like, and there's all these.
So let me ask you a question. Why is it like, to me, it looked just, I mean, I've always been a guy that I'm always mountain biking and hiking and canyoneering. And so I've just never had like a weight problem or anything like that. So I started looking at, you hear about Ozempic and all these other ones you're mentioning. And I'm like, oh, it was for diabetes, right? It was for like extreme cases for diabetes patients. And then it's now just everyone's taking it. You see movie stars, and I'm like, isn't that potentially dangerous? I mean, if you don't really need it, like.
Well, I think there's kind of a couple of different camps, right? So, like, if, you know, me personally, I think that obesity is a disease, like
for sure,
like alcoholism, right? And I don't think you're born an alcoholic, but you can induce alcoholism, right? And I think like, as I've looked into the space, like obesity is a disease that I don't necessarily think in all cases that you were born with, but I believe you can induce it. So, you know, I've lost a bunch of weight doing like intermittent fasting. So I've lost actually an enormous amount of weight, right? But so what intermittent fasting does, it helps you control your the glucose in your blood, right? So
it helps with insulin resistance, right?
Exactly. So same thing with like this fasting, right? But what's happened, and from my understanding, is like, you know, when we're kids and we start prioritizing, you know, some of these super refined grains and sugars and things like that, right? Like our insulin resistance starts to grow, right? And once that is broken, it becomes this perpetual cycle of like addiction, right? Where you're craving, you know, the things that you probably shouldn't want. You're not prioritizing proteins and things like that, right? So when your insulin spikes in somebody who has obesity, its ability to recover is not good at all, right? So so that then once it stays up, then that induces like things that they call like food noise, where people who are obese are like thinking about food all of the time because their body is so out of whack chemically that it cannot control, like it induces all of these like thoughts and patterns and stuff, right? So they never really was understood what all of that meant because I had food noise my whole life, right? Then I started learning about fasting. I read this book by Jason Fung. He's actually a Canadian doctor, called The Obesity Code. And it starts to talk about fasting and how fasting can sort of start to correct and control like all this insulin stuff. And it really is, so it's like a non-drug approach, right? But the GLP-1 drug actually does the same thing. In diabetics, it helps with A1C, but there are also non-diagnosed diabetics who are obese, right? Like my A1C was always like 5.9, never really crossed the 6 threshold, right? But I was kind of always pre-diabetic, like right on that edge, right? And my resting glucose was always very high, right? So that kind of tells me I'm highly insulin resistant, right? So for me, because of my cardiology stuff, like I needed to lose weight, right? To help make sure I'm around for a while. So like I looked into this thing, I had done ketogenic diet, and I always, it's something like if you don't make it a lifestyle forever, it comes back, right? So I'd done it twice, I'd lost a bunch of weight twice, gained it all back twice. And then what happens is there's this concept of a set point. So like when you gain weight back, you actually gain more weight back. And then your body wants to fight you to be that new weight, right? So anyway, I'm not gonna like get too nuts on it, but my point is, I think that these GLP-1 drugs are revolutionary because they not only are helping treat this A1C, insulin resistance stuff, but there's like a lot of other facets to it. And I think they will.
Do you have to keep taking it though?
You do. They don't hardwire you. I don't believe they will change people permanently. Like you basically take the medicine, as far as I understand, and it changes the way your brain operates. So people are actually using these drugs not only for, so I think the GLP concept applies to even more than obesity. It actually applies to addiction, which is very interesting. So people who are taking these drugs are finding themselves not craving alcohol, right, and other type of drugs, right?
Any muscle loss
that it makes people not crave water. So when you're on a GLP drug, you have to, I've read about like you got to remember to drink your water and stuff like that, right? So
any muscle loss.
So I don't know. I think muscle loss is highly dependent on the way in which you lose weight. So that's why for me, I've been doing what's called alternate day fasting, right? So like if you eat a lot less every day, you're training your body to live off of that much less, right? But if you don't eat for a day, right, you're basically, and then when you do eat, it's not less, it's in abundance, right? So like I will fast for up to 40 hours, like, twice a week.
You do like sea salt with water, like you're still getting it.
And actually in a short fast, you don't really need electrolyte supplements. Longer fasts do. But I'll fast for 40 hours, but when I eat, I show my body food is in abundance, right? So I'll eat like 1,500 calories in a 4-hour period, right? Or 2,000 calories in a 4-hour period. So,
but it's probably pretty good nutrient dense. You're probably not just slamming Doritos.
Right. And it's good stuff, right? It's steak, it's proteins and things, I try to prioritize those because like they talk about how like if you eat proteins first, then your carbs, your insulin spike is actually a lot less than if you do carbs first and stuff like that. So there's definitely something to that, right? But what my point in saying all this is like I've been weighing myself every single day, and I've watched my scale. I have like one of those, smart scales. They're not perfect, but they kind of track. They're not exact, but they track the trend, right? And so I've actually watched my lean tissue only slightly drop, right? And I was concerned about that. I was like, that's not good. But so actually like the skin on your body is lean, it's not fat, right? So as I'm shrinking, I'm actually supposed to lose some of that lean tissue, right? But in terms of like muscles and all of that, it's been the fat curve has been much more.
Yeah, the
that
ratio is
traditional
much
lean
better.
ratio. Correct. And
Yeah.
I think,
Yeah.
I did do some stints where I was doing like just trying to get back to a normal eating pattern, like 2 meals a day and stuff. And actually I did notice, but that was like a 2-week period, and maybe that's too short of a period, so I'm not a scientist, but I did notice that like my lean tissue started to kind of dive a little bit. And I was like, okay, so maybe there is something to this like feast famine cycle, instead of showing your body that there is food every day, but there's just a lot less of it, right?
Yeah.
So anyway, I think it's fascinating. I think, these drugs will become commonplace. I think they're going to change the way the world looks, and I also they're going to change the way the world is in terms of health, right? Like you're going to see businesses in the next 10 to 15 years. I think certain, like the whole Little Debbie aisle at the grocery store, right? That's going to diminish, right? Because as soon as these drugs
man, I
become
hope
accessible,
so. You just,
yeah,
like, I just
all
went
this
in
trash
yesterday.
food that's in the market, people aren't going to want it, right?
Yeah, that would be an awesome outcome.
So I think
that really would be.
Yeah, and I think the problem has been with these drugs is like you've got like the Ozempic, right, is for actual diabetics, and then there's like the Wegovy, which is for weight loss and obesity, right?
Okay.
But the big challenge with these drugs is access, right? Like the health insurance plans aren't covering it, and I think it's interesting that you could, because I looked into it for myself, and my health insurance was like, yeah, we don't cover that, sorry, right? But we will cover bariatric surgery, right? So if you want bariatric surgery, that's covered, Pete. Go ahead. It's like, what? That's crazy, right? And the problem is like so many people want access to this drug, right? And so few people are willing to go through the hurdles that it takes to get bariatric surgery, right? So, I mean, I think it's just going to change. It's really going to change the world. I mean, it's going to become a daily pill. People are not going to be obese, which all of the comorbidities that go with that will start to diminish, right? In the healthcare industry. I think overall insurance companies might be a little terrified about that, right? Because they're going to be putting out less money. So that means premiums are going to have to go down, right? So it's like, as we become a healthier planet, the role of the payer starts to shrink. If everyone's relatively healthy, if people aren't getting diabetes, if people aren't having heart attacks from obesity, right? So I'm just trying to wrap my head around, I love your ideas around like, who are going to be the winners and losers in the economy when this thing takes hold, right? Because I'm trying to figure out where I place my bets in the stock market, and I don't know. I haven't been able to like make the connection of like, do I buy puts on whoever owns, forget who owns Little Debbie, or whatever,
Sarah Lee or
Sarah Lee.
Well, it's, yeah, I mean, so the issue is there's so much money. I did this last podcast, Dr. Mark Halstead, and I was kind of riffing on with him. There's so much, actually I did with Steve Aylward. So the episode 2 dropped yesterday. And there's so much money to be made off of inefficiency in healthcare. And same thing, there's so much money to be made off people being unhealthy. Like treating, there's enormous money on treatment. So how do you pivot the incentive structure towards prevention, which is just what you're doing, taking steps that are not easy to be just healthier, right? So you look at like almost like these accountable care organizations and shared savings programs. Like, we get paid. Here's these covered lives. We get paid if the quality of the patient is here, but the costs are here. You get to keep the difference. So how do you shift? I mean, what are we talking about? Trillions, a couple trillion from just treatment to here? Because that's what you have to do. You can't just say, oh, well, treating lives, we're cutting $1 trillion out of spend. There has to be an adjustment, because right now all they want to do is let's cut it out. Well, there's no incentive. There's no incentive for payers, no incentive for life sciences, drug companies. Could you imagine if Pfizer came out and said, yeah, what we're actually going to do is we're going to start creating whole food companies, and we're going to adjust. It's almost like you're seeing oil companies getting involved in more, other sort of like cleaner energy things, where they're just saying, Exxon is not going to willingly just say, we're just going to blow ourselves up.
Right. Well, I mean,
regardless of what Greenpeace may want.
Yeah.
So it's, how do you create an incentive structure that says they're going to wean their own business off this and open hydroelectric plants or get into nuclear power plants, which not again, but anyone who's against nuclear, who wants to decarbonize our energy, is either liar or corrupt or just wildly naive. Like, there's no way we're going to be able to make it. So how do we shift the incentive from coal and heavy crude, et cetera, and say, we want to get really clean. So hydroelectric makes a lot of sense. Nuclear, especially with some of the new technologies and the micro reactors are doing it. You put a little one in, it's, the size of a TJ Maxx that can power a city of 50,000, right? Like just outside the city. Just some amazing stuff, right?
I'm not checked into that. That's awesome.
Oh, there's so much cool stuff going on. We just have to get the regulations out where it doesn't take 20 years to get approval and build it. There's no reason to. And then have like natural gases be your backup if you had to. So then you're getting so much cleaner, so much cheaper. But it's back here to healthcare. Like, how do you, and the food industry and the pharmaceutical life sciences, how do you help them make money when it's a lot less on treatment, because we're making people so much healthier. We're helping encourage them, giving them way better food options. Like when, yesterday I'm going in and like Mother's Day's coming up, and I'm a mentor to young men in my church. And so we're like, hey, here's a good idea. Boys are really horrible, men in general, about remembering Valentine's Day, Mother's Day, anniversaries, and that kind of stuff, right? Yeah, there you go. Right. Yeah. And I'm sure your secretary helped you remember.
No, this was all me. This was a month ago. I thought about this.
That's awesome. Good for you. I have to set alerts. I have good intentions, but if I realize I don't marry it with good process, the intentions just go out the window.
Yep.
That's good business practice, kids. So I'm like, hey, I don't eat cookies. I gave up soda 5 years ago. I don't eat refined sugar. I just don't. But I'm like, hey, I'm not going to tell anyone else to do. Say, hey, we're going to we do an activity every week with the youth in the church. And then we're like, hey, let's get the church, bake cookies. We'll get Mother's Day cards. You fill it out, write your mom a personal note,
nice,
a real personal note, have these cookies, put it in a bag and take it home. It'd be a good thing, right?
Fantastic.
So I'm walking through the supermarket and I just count, I'm like you, aisle after aisle after aisle of just pure crap. And it's like, people, I wish people would think about their bodies like a high-end sports car. You're not going to put garbage, crappy 80, what's that stuff you put in, the additive, the supercharges, the gas, octane. You're going to put low garbage 78 level octane, and you've got a high-end sports car.
Right. No,
like,
you're not.
Your body is like the greatest sports car ever. Like, what are you doing eating Little Debbie's? What are you doing slamming, 32 ounce of Coke and then, whatever. Like, guys, like, I get it, but it's wildly addictive. Wildly 100%. Addictive. And so I'm just going through like, so how do you change all that? You're talking about trillions of dollars in the food industry, trillions of dollars in medical industry that is at odds with what you're talking about. So, and I don't know what the answer is to shift that incentive structure, but I guess to your point, it's if the vast number of consumers through hopefully doing what you're doing, or if they can't do that using GLPs, their tastes change. They just don't want it anymore. Then eventually all these industries will have to adapt, because eventually you will follow consumer demand. So maybe that's to your point.
Right. People's, like, for me, I don't think I've overcome my obesity. I found a way to manage it. right? And so,
Well, what's the key? What's the key to being a successful recovering addict is to admit you're always an addict.
Absolutely.
Right.
But unlike being an addict, you have to eat food, right? So you can't take heroin in moderation, right? You can't take cocaine in
That's true.
moderation. I mean, maybe
Very
some
true.
people can, but I just, the point is you have to eat food, right? And so that's like, I'm real good at stopping things or starting things, right? I'm very input,
Yeah.
output, right? On and off, ones and zeros, but it's that middle ground that's always like been the challenge. And then, so for me, this has been the only thing that's worked, and I don't limit myself. I try to prioritize things, right? I did give up soda for multiple months, diet soda, right? And then just recently I was like, yeah, I want one. I had one, right? And then I had another. And now I'm like, do I still have them? I don't know. So I feel like that was a slip on my part, right? So I'm probably just going to stop doing that again.
You just start over again. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. You nailed it. It's about consistency and starting over. The only reason any diet ever failed is because you weren't willing to start over, right? Or this is more a lifestyle.
Or you punish yourselves. I've never done this. Again, I've never had a problem, but I've had lots of friends that I've seen in their diets and do this.
Yeah.
And the thing there's some commonalities I noticed. One is they had in their life, they had years and years and years of not exercising regularly, not eating particularly well, et cetera. And then they think they're all of a sudden become radical. So they take this program where they're going to make 6 little micro meals a day. And then they have to do an hour of this exercise of this. And then if a week or two into it, they forget one day, or they end up screwing up and having a donut and they have that really negative emotion, well, then they fall off the wagon, or they have to double up the next day or starve themselves. And I'm like, why not just don't? Why not say, and don't view it as a screw up. Yeah, you had a Snickers bar. So what? Just don't have one the next day. So what? You forgot you didn't run the day before. Don't try to double it. Like that is such a negative. Just start over again. Don't beat yourself up. Just start over again and be okay.
I look at it as like, I'm not denying myself anything. Like if I want to have pizza, I'll have pizza, right? It might not be today because today is my fasting day, right? So tomorrow night, if I want pizza, I'm gonna have pizza, and it may not be a protein. It may be not the best, but it is something that I've recognized in my life, that there is my conscious and then there's my subconscious, right? And I can't control my subconscious. Whatever happened in my life has wired that subconscious, and it's not within my reach, right? So if I put it in my head that you will never have pizza again, eventually my subconscious will make sure that I have that pizza, right? And I think that's been the challenge with the soda thing. Like, no, you will not have Diet Coke anymore. It just took a few months, right? But my subconscious eventually pushed it forward and made my conscious sort of give in.
And if you have one every so often,
I didn't beat up myself about it. I'm like, whatever.
Because this isn't like drug addiction or alcohol addiction, where you could almost make it a moral thing. Like if I do drugs or alcohol, I beat up someone, I get in a car accident, whatever it is. Just choosing to eat something that isn't good for you isn't moral. And it's less about, you said it earlier, it's less about denying myself rather than choosing something different.
Right. I always just say not now. That's not saying no.
Oh, that's cool.
It's just not now, later.
Dude,
right?
that's cool.
You know what I mean? Because then you're not really saying no. You're just saying when or not now, right? And that comes down to the business world too, right? Like I never say no to something that my customer asks me for, but I do choose to say when. So it's kind of a play on that, right?
I need to adopt that, because we have customers that want some new feature, and my response is, "Are you crazy?" So maybe I should just I should adopt like.
You're right. Like I'm the trusted. I try to be that trusted advisor for my customers, right?
Yeah.
Like that's my role. Is like, hey, you should trust me enough to bring me into a business decision. But I fully recognize that in my role and in my previous roles, right? particularly on the provider side, right? Like we're a service organization. We're here to help the business achieve its goals, right? We want to have a seat at the table. But when the customer says, hey, I want X, Y, and Z, and I want it done all at the same time, then part of my job becomes, okay, well, this is the capacity we have to deliver, right? So I'm not saying no, but I'm saying when, right?
So your primary customer is the physician and your secondary customer is the patient for you in your role, right?
I wouldn't say that. I would say the patient is my primary customer, right? Everything
Gotcha.
I do is aligned to patients. The physicians are the ones that are delivering the care to those patients. So, right, like they're the ones that are a part of our business that are patient facing, right? So I'm not, but like the reason why I came back to the provider side is because what pulled me into the provider side in the first place, when I was a consultant working at University of Chicago and I had never worked at a hospital before, was watching the impact that my work made on patient care, right? Like we used to run, when I was running radiology there, for radiology IT, right? It was like, you could literally see if you didn't do a good job, the person on the table was not going to have a good experience, right? Whether they were in an MRI or a CT or whatever, your system went down and it took them 2 hours in that scanning suite instead of one, right? You're directly impacting their life, right? And if they're not in good health, you could be endangering their life, right? So I fell in love with the idea that my work somehow impacted somebody at the other end of that line.
So how do you dance that edge, right? Because physicians, they're your customer, indirect secondary customer, so to speak. But the physicians at Duly could get you fired. The patients probably couldn't.
100%. I think I'm speaking.
So how do you? So I agree with you. Your priorities are 100% right. How do you dance that line? Because that's an art form and a science, right?
Yeah. So to clarify, I think the physician's customer, the front desk person's customer, are the CEO's customer, everyone's customer is the patient, right?
Yeah.
However, we have built a leadership team, right, that has that same mindset, right? So the people who sign like my checks, right, the people I work with every day aren't the patients, right? Like I'm not sitting at a clinic going, how can I make Epic better for you, Mr. Bickman, right? Like I'm not doing that, right? So these are the people I work with are the proxy to the patient, right? So when they come together and say we need to do this project or that project because it's going to better patient care, in that moment they are my customer, of course, right? Like I'm providing a service, my team provides a service to the senior leadership team, and their subordinates throughout our organization, right? The end user is the patient. That's all of our customer. So there isn't really a line to ride, right? But what I try to do is, like when I was a product manager, right, it's to bring the voice of the customer, right, to understand what the end user needs, right? And so that's the shoes I try to put myself in when we're making business decisions, right? It's like, if that was my mom or my grandma or my dad who was the patient, how is this going to eventually affect them? And is it going to benefit them? Is it going to not benefit them? Right. So I try to always keep that like lens in my mind as like how does that impact the person at the end of the line? Right. But as a business, we are horizontally and vertically aligned, right, to ensure that the work that we do drives patient care to improve, right, to ultimately improve patient lives, right? So hopefully that provides some clarity into why I'm back on the provider side, and I'm loving it, because my goal has always been to come and be closer to that patient experience, right? And when I was a product manager, I was building the future, right? And I wasn't installing the software. I was building the future, and now I'm delivering today, right? We're keeping Epic running. We're doing all these projects and things to better patient care. So I feel like now I'm I'm closer to the patient than I've ever been, right? Second to that would be when I was at UFC, right? And when you leave to go to the vendor side of the world, you're farther away from the patient. Your knowledge of everyday happenings of a
For
health
sure.
system starts to fade, right? And so now I'm like back in the thick of it. It's feeling very familiar, but in one of the best ways possible, you know.
That's awesome. Well, I know we got to wrap up here.
Yeah.
Anything else? Any other parting shots? Anything we got to talk about? AI, good, bad, hype, reality. Any
AI is, I think, in a lot of ways like a fun toy, but I think a lot of businesses have to really think about when is the right time to play with your toys and when is the time to like get your work done, right? And we have a lot of work that's yet to be done. And we are, we're looking at AI toys, and stuff like that, but I can't rely on a toy to like do my job right now, and I think not everyone would agree with me. But I think in every organization I've been with, there's so much blocking and tackling that still needs to get done on a daily basis. And I think in some cases, people use it as like the shiny new object to take folks's, their customers' eyes off of what really should be going on, right? Which is blocking and tackling and getting the work done, right?
Look over here,
like,
right?
look,
The rope
AI,
dope.
AI,
Hey,
right?
like Muhammad Ali.
Instead of
Step
like,
there and I'm gonna write cross.
instead of taking all of our medical policies and putting them into a searchable database, we could have done that 10 years ago without AI. Oh, well, let's use AI to read them all for us and be smart. Like, why? You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
so just stuff like that is my perspective. So I have a
I
little
think
bit
people
of like,
overcomplicate it too, right? Like AI is just better software. It's just like the next generation. It's people, the whole thing where this is going to make some key decisions. It's not, right? So if you look at the low hanging fruit, my opinion over the next few years, it's just helping to automate processes that are really crappy and manual right now.
100%.
It's kind of a no brainer, right? And then maybe over time, 5 years from now, 7 years, 10 years from now, you have like this co-pilot. You have basically your digital assistant that is helping, like, hey, I need this, like a really smart Siri. Or if you're a doctor, it's like annotate, you're a radiologist, it notes this up, hey, you might want to consider that. And so you're kind of interacting with the computer in a conversational way. And it's kind of anticipating, it learns what you're doing, and it makes the radiologists much more efficient, higher quality. Because the one thing that we are seeing is a demographic time bomb coming of workers across the board in healthcare. So the number of patients is increasing, and the number of problems they have is increasing, and the number of people that are coming into the profession is not increasing.
100%. Yeah.
So without AI,
definitely a place,
without AI, I don't know how
it
keeps up.
I'm not saying it's not going to be useful. I'm just saying if you're an organization that's prioritizing it over the basics that you haven't gotten nailed down yet, right? That
100%.
In the wrong place, right? But absolutely, like just the other day, I was like, wouldn't it be great if Microsoft would install this thing in Teams and it would just listen to our meetings, summarize it, and then put the tasks that we discussed and agreed upon onto our individual task lists? Like, how
have you used Fathom?
No, I need to try it.
Dude, I'll send it to you. So I have Fathom installed on Zoom and Teams. And so when I'm in a meeting, I hit it. And let me share my screen, actually. Got to pull it out of deleted items here. Make sure I'm not going to get in trouble. Oh, where's Fathom? It's this. Yeah, I'll just show it to you really quick.
Yeah, because I got to run.
Yeah, so let me, I'll share this last thing with you. So what can you see on my screen?
Your email.
You see Fathom, weekly R&D?
Fathom, yes, very cool.
So I'm on my head of R&D, just hit a whatever, and it just did this stuff. I don't mind telling people. It did, like, here's a key takeaway. We're building NLP in our platform. We're improving data, embedding best practices, all this stuff.
Very cool.
And so rather than me having to take notes and maybe take notes, it does it. And it goes through key takeaways, topics, next steps, and all this stuff.
Goodness,
right?
This is awesome.
Yeah. So it's like one of those no-brainers. And so that's what I was telling someone else, like, that's a no-brainer for
That's easy. That's
AI.
Good.
Right.
100%. That's it. That's what we need, right? And then if we could take it a step further and start populating to-do lists and distributing them to the right folks and hounding them on my behalf, that'd be even better, right? So we're gonna get there.
Hounding, exactly.
Right,
awesome,
man.
dude. We'll have to do this again, like once you've been there, like later in the year, and talk about more of the progress you guys are doing with Epic. So I'll put a link to your LinkedIn in the description. People can find it. I'll put a link to Duly as well in the description that everybody can find, and then people can harass you directly.
Perfect. I love it. All right,
awesome,
man.
my friend. This was a real pleasure.
Pleasure was mine. Take care.
See you, buddy.
Bye.
Bye.